In studio is Dan McMillan, the founder and executive director at Save Democracy in America. Dan, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, Dan. So how will President Biden stepping down impact the campaign finances of the Democratic Party?
Not really in a significant way. I mean, there's a lot made of the fact that if Harris becomes the top of the ticket, then she directly takes the cash that's on hand in the campaign funds. But the fact is, it's really a non-issue because if they nominate another candidate other than Harris, that money can immediately be transferred to the DNC or to a super PAC allowed with the party. The money will not go to waste. And on the other hand, I think it's true that whoever the candidate is, the Democratic donor class is very eager to defeat Donald Trump, and plenty of money is going to flow in. So I don't think that's a consideration.
Is it fair to say that although it may not cause an obstacle on the surface, that candidate would have to have President Biden's blessing? Does he have the ultimate say over where that money will go?
No, not really. I don't see that he does. If he's stepped aside as the nominee, I mean, I'm sure that people would listen to him. But the reality is that money cannot be transferred directly to another candidate. It would have to go to the DNC or to party super PACs, which would then spend that money on behalf of the presidential candidate and, if need be, on behalf of down-ballot candidates. There's no reason for Biden to have to be involved in that.
So how might the financial strategy of the Democratic Party change now with a new candidate?
Well, they may shift a little bit more to outside spending, since if Harris is not the nominee, that money going to the super PACs. But I think that they may find that they really can juice their small dollar fundraising, because I feel very strongly that the party should follow an open process that a number of prominent Democrats have suggested. That is to say that let Vice President Harris, but whatever other Governor Whitmer, Newsom, Beshear, and so on, to sort of go. They could go on media interviews or in person. They can make their case directly to the American people, and come 4 weeks from now, the Democratic convention polls would give some idea as to which candidate generated the most enthusiasm among Democratic voters. And in that sense, I wouldn't be surprised if they got a lot more small dollar money from their people, because there's been a huge enthusiasm gap through this whole campaign between Trump and Biden. And I think one reason for that is that through this process, the Democrats have to some degree ignored the wishes of their own voters. Because going back 2 years and more, in poll after poll, 2/3 of Democratic voters said, we don't want Biden to run again. And whether it was by mutual arrangement or by inertia, who knows, effectively what Democratic voters got was an uncontested primary, a Biden-Harris coronation. And if I were a Democratic voter, I'm of no party, I would be rather annoyed by that. And in fact, a lot of Democratic voters were annoyed by it. Suddenly, in this way, even though the voters would not directly participate in choosing the nominee, by expressing their opinion in polls, their voice would finally be heard in the process. And I think that would be fantastic. You know, everyone in the party is seeing this as this terrible crisis and catastrophe, and oh, woe is me, what are we going to do? This is a marvelous opportunity. We've never seen in history. This is the first, I don't think this is the first time in history where a party that was going into the general clearly behind, losing, suddenly has a chance to completely reset the campaign. I would also say I have no opinion as to which is the best candidate, but if the nominee is not Harris, then that candidate cannot be blamed for inflation, the crisis at the border, Afghanistan. You've got a fresh start. Suddenly all the Republican attack lines are irrelevant. And I would also observe with regard to Harris, Republicans and other people are already saying that they will accuse Harris of being complicit in a cover-up of President Biden's frailty and cognitive decline. And in view of the reporting I've seen in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, there seems to be a lot of evidence of many people in the Democratic Party, in the White House, and in the campaign, noticing a steep decline on the part of the president in the last few months. Harris, being so close to the president as his number two, would suffer that accusation, whereas a governor like Newsom or Whitmer or Beshear or Westmoreland, Maryland, they don't have that problem. So,
and to your point, former President Barack Obama's statement doesn't necessarily endorse Kamala and opens the idea of having multiple people at an open convention in just a few weeks at the DNC's convention. How do you see that whole situation playing out? Who's the ultimate decider? What needs to happen to secure Kamala before that, or not?
Well, I mean, they could secure Kamala before that. I mean, if the people at the top, you know, the people who are influential kind of agree among themselves that they want a Harris coronation, I doubt very much that any of these other possible candidates like Whitmer or Bashir would risk the wrath of the party by actually challenging Harris. So what would have to happen for this process is for the party, for the DNC, to say, and there is obviously support near the top of the party for this. You know, Obama, by implication, Nancy Pelosi, and many others, that they got to say, okay, we're going to have an open audition. The delegates are released to vote their conscience between now and then. The DNC, we're going to be the gatekeepers. We're not going to let Robert Kennedy with his worm-eaten brain jump in, right? But any serious Democratic candidate, a governor or a senator, will allow them to come in. And then I say, you know, instead of hiding from the media, which frankly I think Harris has done from unscripted contact, let him get out there and take unscripted interviews, take hostile interviews, show what they can do. And we could have a real campaign of ideas. The media, all eyes, the eyes of the nation would be on this process. It would suck all the oxygen out of the room for Trump and his campaign. I think it would generate tremendous excitement, and I think the party could go into the home stretch with a fresh face and some real democratic legitimacy for its candidate. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the party and for the country.
A big part of any political campaign is the infrastructure and how that campaign is run. Yeah. And so, you know, former President Trump came under fire for having a very weak infrastructure in his first and back in 2015. He's getting a lot of praise right now for the way that it's set up. Now that, you know, you have Kamala there, President Biden's infrastructure is in place. How big of a challenge is it to kind of reset everything this far out?
Well, you certainly couldn't reset it, but it seems to me that whoever becomes the nominee would simply use all of the Biden-Harris campaign staff, apparatus, and so on. The apparatus would stay the same. It continue to do a lot of what it's doing now while the nominee is being chosen. I don't really see that has to be a problem.
Dan McMillan, we're going to take a short break. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.